Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now after a few recommendations I decided to re-enable my Game Pass for PC subscription and download Sea of Thieves, a game that I've been meaning to buy since it launched, but never have. I've been playing it on my own for a little while now, something I didn't even know you could do, and I have to say that this is one of the most therapeutic gaming experiences I've had in a long time. I've been sailing the open seas, exploring any and all islands on my way, and accidentally exploding myself with gunpowder barrels. Yeah, I'm still at the beginning of the learning curve. You'll probably see a bit of footage in a minute where I lowered the sails but forgot to release the anchor. This despite me playing the tutorial level first as well. If I was a 17th century pirate I would have been laughed out of Nassau for sure. If I could get my ship moving, of course. I've only got a couple of hours playtime under my belt thus far, but I have been having a figurative and literal blast. What's more, Sea of Thieves runs fairly well on my modern mid-range system too, even with the graphics settings set to recommended, which in the case of my i5 12400F and 3050 defaulted to a mixture of the lowest and highest values. Even the settings are appropriately named to fit the theme of the game, including Cursed, Common Rare, Legendary and Mythical. I'm sorry, but I love the fact that the lowest settings are called Cursed. That is excellent, though. Having said that, the game's art style means that even when playing with these settings and perhaps a cursed system, visually Sea of Thieves will still be very easy on the eye. I wish I had covered this game when it came out, because I certainly have been the unlucky owner of a few cursed components in my time here on YouTube. Beyond cursed, I would say, in fact. The reason I wanted to talk about this more today is because when I was downloading it, I had a chance to read all about the game itself and try and familiarise myself with the way things work, as well as some important background info. It's something I try and do with all the games I play. I don't know if it's just me, but reading about the development and synopsis of games is sometimes just as enjoyable as playing them. That must just be me. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. When I was reading up on Sea of Thieves, I came across an old PC Gamer article dated prior to the game's release. Back in 2017, the game's executive producer, Joe Neate, explained that the game would look great at 4K 60 FPS, but also great at minimum spec. Ted Timmins added that they even included a 540p and 15 FPS mode in response to talks with the community, for the sake of allowing those with systems below the minimum specs to enjoy the game. Now this is all old news of course, but as someone who downloaded Sea of Thieves for the first time a couple of days ago, I was pleased to see that these options are still available to choose from, and of course this made me a little curious. If you go to the support page of the game's official website, you'll be able to view a list of suggested PC specifications. In addition to the game's minimum requirements, as also detailed on Steam and through the Microsoft Store, there is an extra below minimum spec column, and it's here we'll find more info on the requirements to play with a cursed computer. I don't have many cursed components left lying around, not as many as I used to, but I do have one of the weakest modern Intel chips at my disposal, and it's been a while since I tested the Pentium G7400 along with its UHD 710 graphics. This is the most powerful Pentium to date. It has very strong single core performance, but in my review I concluded that it makes little sense if, like here, it's priced closely to the far superior i3-12100F. I've paired it with just 4 gigs of 3200MHz DDR4 today for the ultimate cursed experience. Single channel of course. I don't actually think you can buy 2GB desktop DDR4 modules anyway. This hardware combination is surely going to make us want to walk the plank, but let's see how it does. So first things first, and we're going to drop to 540p and use the cursed preset, which the game had already defaulted to. Very handy indeed. As I said before, the art style of the game means it still looks charming even with the lower settings, and even with this sub HD resolution it's alright. It's a little bit more pixelated around the edges and softer to look at overall, but for the most part it's fine. Enabling the performance overlay reveals a plus 30 FPS experience, surprisingly, though there are dips and drops below this as you might expect with this sort of hardware. We have got just 2 physical cores after all. Not unplayable by any means though. I think the most noticeable difference here is with the water, and of course as a game with sea in the title, the water plays a pretty big part. It still looks decent enough though, actually. The ocean spray and deep blue waves crashing against our ship is still visually effective. A lot of games can lose that special touch when the graphics are turned right down, but here, that simply isn't the case. I think most of our stuttering issues came from the 4 gigs of RAM. Ignore what I wrote in Afterburner, it still says 16 gigs because I forgot to change it, so I've done a super professional Photoshop job and covered it with my own label. 4 gigs of RAM isn't really enough these days for any game, considering that it's being used by other background processes too, not just the game you're playing. I'd still call this experience somewhat playable though, thanks to the 540p mode. Now, of course, we can't forget about the 15 FPS setting, of course, which will make for smoother gameplay and will help alleviate some of those stutters and slowdowns. You can, of course, set a custom FPS cap outside of the game using something like RivaTuner, and there you can add any number, so maybe if you're struggling at 30 FPS, 25 or 20 might be better choices. The relaxing nature of the game though, especially when you're at sea, means that it does still feel playable at 15 FPS, sort of. Now that isn't something that a lot of games could get away with, and while a lot of you wouldn't dream of gaming at 15 FPS, it is nice that the option is here for those who want or need it. During my playtime, I did also wonder about how big the performance difference was between 540 and 720p, and the results on screen now should answer that question. I walked the same route with both resolutions for this test for the same amount of time, and found that at 720p we didn't exceed 30 FPS. Not on average anyway. The 540p option did allow us, however, to break this barrier, but there is also a resolution scale slide option, so you could adjust that ever so slightly instead, or if you want to go even lower than 540p, you can drop to 50% of that as well. And the game really will look, well, you know what it's going to look like. But there we go, Sea of Thieves. I can't believe I've not played this before. It is so nice to see that even a few years after its release, it does still include the options to drop the graphics and resolution to super low levels. And not only that, but it is playable on modern low-end hardware, such as the Pentium G7400. Because the graphics found in AMD CPUs, such as the 3000G, and the entry-level Ryzens are slightly stronger than UHD graphics, you're probably going to have a better time with those chips. But I thought, why don't we test it with one of the weakest hardware combinations I have that just so happen to exist within the same piece of metal. Thank you very much for watching then. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't. Tomorrow we'll probably be checking out an old Dell desktop I found on eBay. It could do with a little bit of a repair job. That video will either be up tomorrow or the following day. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.